Future of Digital Music, and will be moderated by Justin Osofsky. Justin and the panelists, will you please join me on stage? Justin Osofsky handles, panelists, please join us. Justin heads our media partnerships, including music, video, and news. And we have 3 panelists here that we're very excited to have join us. First, Bob Pittman is chairman of Clear Channel Media and Entertainment Platforms, the founding member of the Pilot Group, and the co-founder and programmer who led the team that created MTV. He's served as CEO of MTV Networks, the Time Warner Enterprises, Six Flags Theme Park, Century 21 Real Estate, and AOL Networks. He's also been COO of America Online and then AOL Time Warner. And he served as a board member for Electronic Arts and Atari Games, among others. Very happy to have you here today, Bob. Daniel Ek is a serial entrepreneur and technologist who started his first company in 1997 at the age of 14 and co-founded Spotify in 2006. Today, nearly 3 years after launching, Spotify is available in 8 markets and is the fastest growing and largest digital music service of its kind. Awesome to have you here, Daniel. Finally, we have Troy Carter, renowned music manager, is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Atom Factory, a music management brand. Carter has established the careers of numerous recording artists, including multi-platinum Grammy Award winner, Lady Gaga. Justin, have fun with the panel.
Thanks a lot, Bubba. And thank you to everyone who's attending it here in San Francisco, in addition to those of you who are joining us on the global live stream broadcast. This morning, we made the most significant improvement to our platform since it originally launched in 2007. With Timeline, you now have the control to tell a more complete picture of your life that spans months and years rather than just minutes or days. And we think that Timeline paves the way for a new class of social applications built to allow you to showcase who you are and what you care about. One of the most interesting industries to explore that in is music, but we actually view what's happening in music in a broader context of what's happening on the web today. For the first 15 years of the web, your experience was defined by 2 characteristics. 1, it was anonymous, and 2, you tended to be searching for something specific. And for that reason, if Bob was on the web trying to find and listen to music, Daniel was on the web trying to find and listen, and Troy was there, and I was looking over each of their shoulders, it would actually look identical. It wasn't personalized, and it wasn't a reflection of how you discover music in real life. What we're launching today with our platform is a way to bring your true identity into music discovery and a way to find the music that your friends most care about. This applies to music. It equally applies to news. As partners such as the Washington Post and the Daily and Yahoo News, it applies to video, as Netflix and Hulu and others have shown today. But we wanted to really dive a bit into music, given the level of interest and our excitement of what it means. So Bob, to kick off this discussion, I'd love for you to take today and put it in context over the last couple of decades, that music's always been something social. You go to concerts with friends. You make playlists that you want others to listen to. How do you think of today in this broader context of what's been happening in the industry?
So I'm the old guy, is what you're saying.
Not at all. Experienced.
Thank you. I think if you look at music, you really look at the web, the digital world, and say, this is just a way to do what people have been trying to do before, or they want to do, but it's more convenient. The technology provides us the opportunity to do a lot more. I mean, I think back when I was a kid, I was back in the days of 45 RPM records, and I had my collection. My playlist was how I stacked them up on the changer. They were portable. I carried them around town in a box to my friend's house, and I had the radio. And I think as you think about all these services out there, you really have to think about there's your music collection and there's your radio. And the two are actually quite different, but incredibly symbiotic. And have always been tied together. And in my day, I listened to my music collection sometimes, and sometimes I just turned on the radio. I wanted the companion. I wanted the person on the radio to tell me about it. There were social aspects to the radio. You don't remember this, but the request line, of course, was the big social tool. There were dedications. Bob from Katona just called in and wants us to dedicate this song to Veronique tonight. And, you know, that was the way in which we all tried to connect. There was time in life in which you paid money to be on party lines. Remember that? For an hour you just talked to strangers, and it was not great, but it was better than anything else. I think over time we saw the music collection evolve to LPs, to, for a brief period, 8 tracks, cassettes, finally the CD, and now digital. What's interesting about the music collection is each one tends to replace the next. I got rid of my 45s. I got rid of my LPs. My wife stunned me about a decade ago when she started burning our CDs on and throwing them away. I go, my God, you can't throw them away. And of course, she was right. I was wrong. On radio, everything tends to be an addition to. AM stations are still here. We added FM. We added satellite. We're adding internet. We're adding all these other forms of listening to radio. And radio is really sort of that curated, somebody else is doing it. Every time you try it without human beings, it doesn't work well. They're looking for that companion to sort of be talking to me. And I'm not sure what it is, but there's always this thing at which I listen to my music collection for a while, and then I say, I'm going to turn on the radio. Or I'm on the radio, and I said, now I'm ready to listen to my music. And through the music, there are things we want to do. We want to say, oh, I love that song. I want to, in the old days, buy it. Now I want to add it to Spotify or whatever. By the time I get home, I've forgotten about it. So the question is, how do you begin to more seamlessly integrate what people already want to do? How do we let people communicate as a group instead of a party line or making a dedication, communicate in real time about it? And obviously we've chosen the platform of Facebook because it allows us to enable this behavior people want to do. We look at stuff like Spotify and say, this is our partner because we're the radio, we know what we do well, we know what we don't do. We got to connect to a music collection that's as integrated into people's lives as they want it to be.
Yeah, and then Daniel, as we think about this integration into people's lives and how they discover music, how do you think about the opportunity here?
Well, I mean, backing it up only a few years ago, most people downloaded MP3s in different forms. They either bought them on iTunes or pirated them. And what we really believe is that what ended up happening is you had these siloed experiences. So in my iTunes library, I was pretty much the only person who knew what was in there. But the transition has really moved from the MP3 to being about the URL. And the good part about the URL is that it's social inherently. We can share it with each other, and another person on the other end can quickly interpret what it means. So for us, just looking at the 3 years of experience we've had working with Facebook, is that the more we get people to engage, the better it is for music. Because ultimately, the more engaged they are, our data tells us that they're more than twice as likely to pay for music if they're engaged.
That makes a lot of sense. And then actually, to add a different perspective, Troy, when you think of what's happening now from the artist's perspective as well, what possibilities does this present, and how do you see what's happening today in the context of what you've seen before?
I think now it gives us the possibility to scale. Showing up here today, I didn't know what to expect in terms of the announcement, and it exceeded my expectations. The fact that I can listen to what one of my friends is, what my friends are listening to. I think for us, what we're looking to do is it's not just about selling a CD anymore. It's not just about selling a digital file. It's how many people can we get the music to at this point? How many people can experience at this point? And then from there, our job is to, from a manager's perspective and an artist's perspective, we've never solely relied on income through the sales of recorded music. It was always how do we build our ancillary on top of this model? And now that model scales, I think the ancillary business gets bigger as well.
Do you think, as you think about the business, because both you and Daniel have raised, I think, really interesting things about the business model. From an artist's perspective, Lady Gaga is obviously one of the most talented and global artists in the world today. For an independent artist that's up and coming, one of the questions people submitted in advance is, how do you think about it differently for an artist that's already kind of established and has a huge backing versus one that's trying to use these to build his or her career? How would you think about that issue?
I think it was interesting, Lady Gaga, she didn't start off as a big artist, so from the very beginning, social media was always a big tool for us, and I wish in 2008 when we first released her record, we had the ability for, because what was happening, people would see her in a nightclub, and all of a sudden, they would tell one of their friends, or they would do a status update, just to get the word out. But now that, you can share music in this way, I think, for the artists that were looking to break from September 21st, and beyond, we have a new discovery tool that exists now.
Yeah, and then to kind of follow up on what you were saying, Daniel, about business models a little bit, you've recently announced 2 stats publicly, which I think are really interesting. One is that Facebook users are twice as likely to become paid subscribers. The other is yesterday, I believe CNBC reported that you've now crossed the 2 million paid subscriber threshold. There's obviously been a lot of innovation right now with freemium models. How do you see business models evolving in your space?
Well, I just think that, again, what Spotify's really focused on is that there's a ton of piracy, music piracy. We believe that there's more than 500 million people who consume music in different shapes and forms all throughout the internet. And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to create a better experience, because we believe that the better experience is the one that will sort of fight piracy. You can't fight piracy with legislation alone, but what you can do is you can try and create a better product. And we believe that that product is inherently social. So when we look at the world and we look at everything that's going, we try and focus on a product that will get people to engage more around music. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, just as Troy said, people will buy music again. They will engage with it. They will go to shows, etc. I remember actually, this is a fun sort of side story, but I remember Lady Gaga, I think it was in 2008 or 2009, toured, I think she did 5 or 6 shows in 1 year in Sweden. And that's really, for an artist of the stature of Lady Gaga, that's, you don't normally do that. But she's been touring heavily all over the world and pretty much seemed to be everywhere at once. And I think that was her social expression. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens the next album she puts out, if we can replicate that digitally, the experiences that she puts out when she performs, and to get even more people to engage with it, and thereby also going to more shows and buying the records.
That's a really interesting anecdote about the way discovery works, and then almost to extend it to yet another medium. What's interesting, Bob, is 80% of music consumption is still by terrestrial radio, and with Clear Channel, you arguably could have just focused on the radio experience and terrestrial radio experience itself. Yet with iHeartRadio and the experience you're launching today and taking out of it, you've done something really innovative in the digital space. Why did you see this, and how do you see the business model aspects of this?
I think if you get down to what's a radio station, it is not a transmitter and a tower. It is a brand. It's a brand that people know and love. There's a reason Z100 is #1 in New York year after year. They got the same records everybody else has. They must be doing something different with it. They're building a relationship with the consumer. And I think what you have to do is you have to say, what's that consumer doing? I mean, one of our first things was with you guys and with Troy, let's do something with Gaga. And let's forget the request line. Let's do Facebook instead of the request line. We did a big promotion when she brought out the new song. We played it every hour all weekend long. We did a big contest around it. We tied it in through, the Facebook was the entry and the mechanism to communicate. And I think when we look at broadly, what does the consumer want this brand to be? And part of it is what's the table stakes? If they're on Facebook, if they're, have a life in digital, if they've got a phone in their pocket that's got the ability to do it, we need to be there. And then we say, what do they give us permission to do? Mm-hmm. And I think in the case of what we've done with iHeartRadio is we've said, okay, we also are going to let them build custom radio stations and build it off a song they're already listening to on the radio. They can instantly say, I want a station built around that artist, that sound. And we've done something unique, which is put a slider in to let them go either from familiar or to discovery. Familiar, you're going to get something that's all the hits. Discovery, you're going to find some crazy stuff out there. But to me, that is the idea of this is a brand. The consumer knows it. What we should give them everything we can, not limit ourselves to what we gave them 30 years ago.
But is there any tension? So it's interesting. You began that response talking about almost the tribes that exist around radio
Right.
stations. Like I listen to 101.3 every day coming into
Yeah.
work and often hear Lady Gaga on it.
Right.
And so there must be some sense of community building around the specific stations. How do you view the tension between that form of community with some of what you're doing at iHeartRadio, which is kind of discovery and kind of expanding?
Well, to me, it is the if we can find a tribe, and boy, we look for them all the time. We can put a radio station right in the middle of it. It's the beacon for the tribe, the voice of the tribe. And I think when you're saying discovery, let them share, that's what they naturally want to do. They have, if you say there's an event, we do Jingle Ball every year in New York Christmas show, it's packed. I mean, the iHeart Music Festival, Radio Music Festival in Vegas, 2 nights in Vegas. Everybody said you're going to have a hard time selling a concert in September in Vegas. Sold out in 10 minutes. Now we let the best fans buy early on Facebook. But it's this idea of let's worship the tribe. Let's let the tribe do everything they want to do. And a lot of it is they want to create their station. So they want to tell their friends, I created this station. Here, look at the station I created. I mean, it's sort of what Daniel's doing with the music collection side of it. We're doing sort of the version of it on the radio side of it, is we build around it, we curate, we do things you don't do with a collection, but we're still doing that same social aspect of let them share it, let them create a dialogue, let the tribe start a discussion,
and
virtual events.
To that point, as similar to what Daniel was doing on the collection side, one of the most interesting aspects of the recent story in Business Week, I thought were your comments on the playlist and how central that was to almost the communities that form organically within Spotify. What are your thoughts there?
Well, playlists are hugely important for us. It's how people express themselves through music. It's not always that it's about one song. That's hugely important too, but sometimes it's through a collection of music. And in our case, we now have more than 400 million playlists that people have created, and they love to share them among their friends. But I will say to Bob's point, though, that radio is different than playlist creation. Radio is more of a curated experience than Spotify is on its own. However, we do feel that your way of creating your music collection and curating it is really done through playlists.
And by the way, if I can say that, you go back in history, there was a time at which your LP collection said who you were. And you would have the LP collection in your living room, and if somebody became unhip, like Peter Frampton appears in Sgt. Pepper and suddenly he's lost his cred, you take that out and throw it in the closet. And I think the playlist is the modern equivalent of that it says who you are.
It's really interesting. Now, saying who you are, Lady Gaga has among the deepest community of fans, the little monsters no one's ever seen. And when you look at her social media presences, she's, I believe, the top person on Twitter with 13 million followers. She's one of the top artists on Facebook with 43 million followers. How do you think about the little monsters community in the context of building it for Lady Gaga, engaging them, and using it within her kind of experience?
You know what? I think now is, I think at the next F8, we're going to see a lot of changes, because now I think where social feels like this big, large community, for us, it's, how do we laser focus on that? How do we make it less passive? How do we appeal to the super fan opposed to somebody who may just happen to like one single? So in our organization, it's just, kind of narrowing that down and just getting a little bit more laser focused on the communities.
Yeah, and what's interesting when you think of some of the products we released today with Timeline and Open Graph, I could certainly imagine adding to my profile a Little Monsters box saying, here are the favorite songs.
No, that's one of the things that I felt was incredible about the product is that now, you have like the 5 concerts in Sweden that you were talking about. You can document that experience, and it doesn't just disappear. And so it's fans out there now who have their Lady Gaga timelines from the time she launched all the way up until last week. So now they have a place to store it. So I think the more that we can. The more layers that we can put on top of the community, the more stickiness, and the more we can, for us, it's not about Lady Gaga talking to the community, but it's about them sharing information amongst each other. Yeah.
One of the I promised when I solicited questions from the live stream audience, I'd work these in on stage. One of the interesting themes I got was almost a discussion of a growth story, a little different in each of your contexts. So Lady Gaga is obviously international. Spotify's been very interesting on this, and with Clear Channel, there's very interesting growth stories, and also the managing across so many different markets with so many different tribes and stations. Daniel, why don't I first kind of begin this discussion with you? That Spotify recently entered the United States. It seems like it's going extremely well. Over 75% of Facebook's users are outside the United States. So of the 800 million users, over 600 million are outside. How do you think, as you look towards international expansion, market entry, growing your business, how do you think about social media and using platforms like this?
Well, the great part is about the product releases that just happened. It really gives us a great way of finding out what's going on in the world. So when we look at new markets and where we want to go, we could just easily see where discussions around music is happening. We could check out, the Lady Gaga fan page and see where people are actually from and kind of determine from there where to move next. So I think what this product that we released this morning really mean is that we're going to see music becoming even more global. So what I said before about sort of the URL becoming the new MP3, it's only partly true because obviously you can't consume music easily by just sharing it across borders yet. But at Spotify, we look at that as one of our biggest missions to solve and biggest problems to solve as well. It's just making it easier for people to share music with each other, irrespectively or if they're here in the States or if they're in Sweden. We just want people to be able to express themselves with music, as music is one of the most social objects there is.
Mm-hmm. And Bob, what are your thoughts on this front? As given the various roles you've played in your career, I'd imagine you have some interesting perspectives on what it means to be global, what the opportunity is, and also what some of the obstacles are.
Well, with us, we are U.S. based,
yes,
because music rights are that. I think the biggest obstacle we have is that, unlike these guys, we're a company that's been around a long time. We have 237 million monthly listeners, bigger than any of the broadcast TV networks in the U.S. We're actually number one in terms of reach. And the easy thing to do is to fall into the trap of, we got this business, we're going to bolt on all this new stuff. And I think what John Hogan, who's the CEO of radio, and I have really hit upon is we said, look, we need to think of ourselves as a nimble startup company that happens to have these traditional assets to use. And we've got to get every one of our program directors and every one of the radio stations not to think they're running a transmitter with a tower, but they're running a brand, which now encompasses all these new platforms they can use. And we also have to think we've got responsibilities to partners. I mean, you guys partner well. We'd like to think we do too. Troy is obviously one of our big partners. He's too modest to tell you, but with all these new tools, you've sold, over 7 million albums now?
Yeah. Yep.
Which is, people sort of forget this metric, which is very important in addition to the touring. And I think the idea is we need to enable a platform for the music business. We need to enable a platform for artists. We need to enable a platform for our own creative people, our programmers. Who wants to stick around if you're doing the same old stuff you've been doing? You have to have the shiny new thing. The good news about these platforms you're talking about, and every year doing something new, is it gives us the tools we need to take these brands and express them in new ways. And by the way, do we eventually go international? Some of it maybe, but there's so much growth opportunity in the U.S. alone that I think we have plenty of things to keep us busy for a while.
And in terms of these shiny new tools, where there's kind of the never-ending need to innovate, whether it's what you're doing in Las Vegas this weekend or other things, versus the need to have a core brand. Like, what's really interesting, Troy, to me about kind of the way in which Lady Gaga has developed her career kind of with you is along the road, it seems like there have just been some very interesting trade-offs that you made, that one could have gone and done major tours in huge arenas on a global scale, arguably earlier. Yet my understanding is that you took a different, very careful approach in terms of thinking about the audience and the brand and the connection. How do you think about building brands of artists in this space? And are there any advice that you'd give to people who are representing artists on how to do that?
My advice would be to take your time. You know, I think one of the problems in the music industry today is that everybody's in a rush. You know, they want to bake the cake in the microwave. So instead of just taking a slow approach, you know, everybody wants, you know, if an artist doesn't sell 500,000 to, you know, 1 million records, you know, on their first cycle, you know, some people consider it a failure, you know, and Bruce Springsteen, you know, he didn't really break into his third album, you know, and when you look back, people don't recognize that, you know. So for us, it's just really taking a slow approach. It's, you know what, if you can play to, you know, and it's no different than, you know, what you guys do on the tech side. When you're rolling out, you don't roll out to the world. You know what, we're going to start in a small beta. So our equivalent of playing a 3,000 seat nightclub that's our equivalent of a beta test, you know, before you get into arenas. And, you know, and it builds the demand. And when you can leave people on, you know, on the outside of the door, then all of a sudden, it builds demand.
You know, it's interesting when you call the 3,000 seat nightclub the equivalent of Lady Gaga's beta. We obviously do kind of these sorts of iterative product launches all the time. So in a way, that's almost one dimension of product development around an artist. Now, Daniel, if we take it to a slightly different context, as you think about product development around Spotify, what is most important to you in the process of developing great products? Like, you've been one of the pioneers on our platform since 2010 with your Connect implementation. You've received all sorts of praise for what you've done at a product level. What drives your product decisions? How do you do it?
Well, for us, it really starts with what the product is and how we ourselves want to enjoy it. You know, we're consumers to begin with. We love music. We love to engage with it. And we find all these creative outputs, whether it's, you know, new companies like Turntable, whether it's, you know, something from Clear Channel like iHeartRadio, which is amazing, or whether it's a music platform like Root Music or others. It is really interesting. I would actually say that we're kind of in a golden age of new music because there's all these tools available for artists. And like Troy said, I don't think we should make drastic conclusions about what's going on, but we need to look at that. And for artists, I can only imagine that it must be very challenging with all these different platforms on how to actually use them at the same time be authentic, because, you know, you can't just put up a Twitter profile or work on a Facebook page and sort of have non-generic messages, because that's not engaging. You need to be engaged with your audience. So what we think about as when we develop product is really about what do we want as consumers and how can we create an engaging experience, and that's social.
Yeah, it was interesting. When you're talking about being authentic as an artist, we, as you know, launched a subscribe product last week where you can add subscribe to your profile, and a number of artists have already signed up, from Ingrid Michaelson to Snoop Dogg as Calvin. He actually, during the Mark's keynote earlier today, like, wrote a listening to Mark Zuckerberg on stage. It was actually pretty awesome. Now, kind of extending almost on that product thing now into the iHeartRadio or Clear Channel context, I remember one of our earliest conversations, Bob, you said a line about radio, which is still stuck a little time later. And it's that when you think about the radio experience, you want it to be, I believe it is, reliable yet unpredictable. When I go to 101.3, I should know what I'm getting there, but there should be an unpredictable element to it as well. That, in kind of the technology world, one would often think of as a core product brand, but also a product issue. How, in the context of radio, do you think about product development? And then I guess the second aspect is, and how does it differ with something like iHeartRadio, or is it just kind of the same regardless of the extension?
Well, we know what we've got in radio. We've got 850 brands, 150 cities. Each one has a sort of a keeper of the vision, and the challenge is to make sure it still sounds like Z100, but it's new and fresh, and there's something that came out of nowhere. iHeartRadio is a way for us to take all those stations and let you go to one place. If you're going to be in the car too, you've got one button called iHeartRadio, and now it opens up this world to you. And it allows us to find features like, look, iHeartRadio, the custom radio feature, we clearly saw what Pandora was doing and said, look, there's an opportunity to do a custom radio as a feature on top of iHeartRadio. If you look at stuff like Turntable, that's a great idea. Stuff like that should be a feature. We should be open to every new idea that we see others doing. We should also be open to every idea that we think of afresh from out of nowhere. And what we really have to do is we've got creative talent. We've got Ryan Seacrest, Elvis Duran. We've got all these great personalities. We've got all these fantastic programmers around the country. We have to figure out a technique to unleash them, to turn them loose so that these ideas come flooding in. Now, I worked for a guy named Steve Ross who took his father-in-law's 2 funeral homes and turned it into Warner Communications and Time Warner. And Steve was my great mentor, and he would always say, you know, in this company, you'll never be fired for making a mistake. In this company, you'll be fired for not making a mistake. If you're not making a mistake, tells me you're not trying anything new, and the assets we're giving you to manage are going to wither away under your management. And I believe that. I believe that the problem with big companies are that it's very, very quickly you try and go for stability. You try and go for predictability. I often find people that are doing something. I say, why are you doing that? I'm trying to get the chaos out. I said, who said we wanted to get rid of the chaos? I think chaos is a byproduct of innovation, and you have to be willing to live in a chaotic environment. And people who can't stand chaotic environments probably shouldn't be in creative businesses.
It's, you know, it's actually in our offices, we have posters around saying all sorts of things, ranging from what would you do if you aren't afraid to fail harder. And like it actually sounds like that's what it'll see for us. Now, Troy, in the context of Lady Gaga, it's you've said in the past that you're taking such risks all the time, running them by her on a 6 a.m. morning call, et cetera. How do you think about this, working in the midst of chaos, innovating, risk-taking? Where do you feel like you're pushing the envelope too far versus not? How do you work with artists in this context?
You know what? We really, really try to push the envelope. So, you know, where, you know, a lot of people look at us like we're crazy, you know, but we have to do it. If it was up to me personally, I would give away the next album and put it on every handset that I could put it on, you know, just to reach that scale. Because at some point we're going to have to try to really experiment with content. And you know, it's a bunch of different models that we like to try. But for us, you know what we learned even from the setup of this Born This Way album, guess what? Some things are going to work, some things aren't going to work. But you can't be scared to fail. You know, and we take big swings at the bat, and you know, sometimes we're going to get big results, and you know, and sometimes you learn a lesson, you make an adjustment, and you know, and you move on. And it's the same thing like what Bob just said. In our office, we're just always pushed to let's innovate, let's innovate, let's innovate.
And then in the Spotify context, Daniel, how do you think of it? Like when you're developing products that in some sense are as great as the products you are, I'm sure along the way there are a lot of learning moments. What are some of those, and how do you kind of coalesce to push it forward?
Well, a lot of it is, funnily enough, comes back to gut instinct. But what we really try and do to kind of stimulate innovation is we'll try anything. It really doesn't matter for us. And ultimately, the great part about the internet is that it's highly measurable. So we can look at the impact it actually has. Does it drive engagement? Does it drive signups? Does it drive artists, you know, exposing themselves much more on Spotify or now even through Facebook? And if all of those metrics are positive, then we've done a great thing. And if not, then so what? We'll restart and build something new. I don't think it has to be that hard. It's really about, if you look at what's happening in the world moves so fast that you need to be, if you really want to be in the forefront, you need to move faster. And what that means ultimately is that there's no way that you will know everything as the CEO of the company. But truthfully, all of the great ideas and decision comes from my team, which means that the team are doing tons of things. Most of them don't work out. But you know what? The ones that do, they work out really well.
If I could just add, because I think
Absolutely.
Daniel hit on something very important. What Daniel's talking about is a wonderful process, but there's one piece you have to make sure is in your culture, which is you have quick decision making. There's so many people who say, we're going to try and get all the information before we make a decision. Well, of course, you'll never find all the information. I think you have to be in a position to say, I'm going to make a decision as soon as I have enough information to make a decision. And oh, by the way, when I'm invariably wrong, half the time maybe, I'll make a quick decision and fix it, and we'll keep changing it. So there's no great damage done because you don't let it stay out there so long because you're trying to get all the information, you're doing the study and review. You've got a committee meeting. You've got 2 task forces looking at it. You say, that didn't work. Let's keep trying.
I just want to add one final point to that. I mean, in the day of Twitter and Facebook, the way to try new products, it's super easy. Just put it out there, and immediately within seconds, you'll get people commenting on it. We're getting probably tons of commenting right now happening about what we're talking about right now. So I guess the point being is don't be scared. If you want to create engagement with an audience, they will tell you what they think.
As we think about engagement, the way in which people are consuming music is obviously rapidly evolving. And it seems like it would be amiss not to talk about the role of mobile. First, to Troy, which I think is really interesting. When you go to a Lady Gaga concert at this point, everyone's got their phones, etc. How do you think about mobile extending the experience? There's actually a guy, Mike Posen from New York, who I think specifically wanted this asked to you because he's thinking through these issues. How do you think about it in the context of where you're focused?
Well, when people go to concerts, they watch concerts like this now. That's the experience. So, I think I probably learned more about the mobile business just from walking the floor to concerts and seeing exactly what people are doing. So, for us, it's how do we extend that experience? How do we, because right now it's like, it's very simple. Either people are tweeting from the concert, either people, they're uploading their YouTube video from the concert. How do we layer into that experience? And I think, over the next year or so, and some of the stuff that we're working on internally, we're going to make it a much more interactive experience while you're in the audience. So it's not just about what happens when you go home or sharing it to people on the outside, but how you're sharing information at the inside of the concerts as well.
That's really cool. And then, speaking of concerts, Clear Channel has the iHeartRadio Festival in Las Vegas tomorrow, and we appreciate you working this one in. One of the things you're doing, my understanding is you're going to be live streaming parts of the festival and concert on Facebook and through other things. In making the decision to live stream, how are you thinking of it? Is it an extension of the concert experience? Is it a complement to? What's the opportunity here?
Well, it's interesting. The big decision for us was, do we sell it to a normal TV broadcaster or a cable network that wanted to buy it live? And we said no. We're doing the whole concert to prove to people there's a whole other way to get this. And so we're streaming it over iHeartRadio. We're letting you go to all your local sites, C100KissFM.com. And, of course, it'll be iHeartRadio when you get there, but get it. We're doing Xbox Live. We're doing Facebook. And on Facebook, I think it's very interesting because we will let people, as they're watching it, participate. And I think that becomes the very critical part of it. So for us, we're going to get, less than 20,000 people will see the concert live. Mm-hmm. Not very many. But now millions can see it and participate in the process. And by the way, nothing better than the social experience of seeing this event, because we're going to have some unique combinations of acts. Troy and I were talking about some of the stuff Lady Gaga is going to do, and it's this incredible combination. The last one I was involved in like this was Live Aid, and out of that just came the magic. Back then, there was no way to talk about it other than to write a letter to the editor of a magazine or a newspaper and have it published, call the request line at a radio station, maybe they'd put you on the air to say something about it. Today, and it's going to be fascinating to watch, is what are people going to say about this incredible array of these artists all in one place over 2 nights, and how does the experience develop? And I think it's sort of like you guys. We put it on, and now it's out of our hands. The artist will sort of develop it into this magic moment. The audience will tell us about it, and the idea of streaming it allows them to participate in this experience and be a part of it. I mean, imagine at Woodstock, for all of us who couldn't get there, I'm the only one here who's old enough to have been there, we would have been able to get it live as opposed to seeing a news story on the nightly news about this thing that happened that clogged up the traffic in upstate New York.
It's interesting that I actually can't wait to see what happens this weekend. I will not ask any leading questions here and take away some of the surprises, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome. The one, mobile seems so central to some of the products that you developed, Daniel. How do you think about the various platforms that you use and kind of the role of mobile in it?
Well, I mean, what we see really is that they're extensions of each other. We notice, for instance, that it's very much the mobile experience when it comes to Spotify is that people want to listen to their collection. They want to bring it with them. Pretty much like the same notion existed with the iPod. The difference here is that they're bringing a lot more music with them, which really, again, gets them to realize the value to pay for music. So I'd just say that what we've found really is that there's two different listening types. You discover a lot more music, and you might even be more social on a PC because you can sort of browse more content. Whereas on a mobile device, we're getting more and more social, and I love the new Facebook app, by the way, but we really we want to get people more social there, but right now what we're seeing is people want to take their playlist with them, and that's ultimately what people are paying for.
It's also, I add it, just on the mobile, what's interesting to me in looking at radio is we're now offering it on mobile, offering it on the internet. Increasingly, the usage is on mobile. People are finding new listening occasions by having it available there. There is, I think about 20% of the people in the country stream it sometime or another. It accounts for, though, about 3% of all radio listening, meaning taking the traditional broadcast radio and everybody on the internet, adding them together is the denominator. But what's interesting is it's almost all additive. It appears to be I'm switching between them, but I've now got one more occasion to listen, and that's incredibly powerful. I brought home the iHeartRadio app on a mobile phone to my 12-year-old son, and he looked at it and go, wow. And I was looking at it and I said, this looks a lot like me as a kid with a transistor radio that was AM only, that was portable, except to have one ear plug instead of two.
Right.
Some things never change. But I think his expression was, wow, I never have to leave it now. I can take it with me everywhere I am because I always have a phone in my pocket.
And do you have any concerns I could even go too far? Like the fact that I can take it everywhere, or is something that pervasive and that sticky really good as you think about developing further one's identity around music?
Me?
Sure.
I've heard that question my entire life. I started MTV when I was 27. Everybody said, oh my God, it's ruining it. It's too much music. No one wants to hear it. First of all, they don't want to see music. Second, they don't want music everywhere. It takes the specialness away from it, et cetera, et cetera. I think when you go to TV and you added all those channels, it went from 3 channels to hundreds of channels, people said, it's too much, it's destroying the way kids think. And by the way, I was the first generation that my parents would come in the room, how could you listen to the radio and have the TV on and do your homework? The reality is we could. We were the first sort of multitasking generation, and probably it did change the wiring of our brains, but I think what it allowed us to do is pick up a lot more information. So I think there is no such thing as too much until the consumer says it's too much, and they'll let you know.
So we only have a couple minutes left in this panel, and I want to ask one question to each of you, that when you look out 3, 5, 7 years, what one or two things most excites you about where you see things that could be heading, and then how do you think we'll get there? Essentially, so when you look out 5 years with Spotify and with the music industry, Daniel, what do you think is the most interesting thing that's going to be emerging?
Well, the most interesting thing really is, as I already pointed out, I think more than 500 million people consume music now online. What we want to do is we want to move them back to a legal way of consuming music. Our belief really is that the music industry, if we put all those people together and we make them engaged more, we make them more engaged in music, we're going to get them to start paying for music again. And that's ultimately going to lead to a world where artists are going to create even more brilliant music and experiment more because they'll have the time. Like what really kind of destroys me today is like back in the old days, not that I was around, but you heard all these great stories about people who could spend a year or two in the studio, and they could afford bringing all these 50 or 100 bands, orchestras to record it. These days, we don't have that luxury. What I hope to do is to create this platform for music where people can enjoy it and engage with it, and that in turn will lead to that the artists will make more money. And by doing that, they will create more interesting music for us to listen to. So I think that it's an ecosystem that it goes around, and that's my hope and belief for the future.
Troy, what's your take on this? A lot of Daniel's answer there reflected on the artist experience, being able to be more creative and the kind of the virtuous cycle. When you look out 5 years, where do you see things heading? What do you most hope?
You know, what's interesting, and this kind of stems from a conversation that I had at breakfast this morning, is that with the music industry, I think now we're going into a place where, you know, Daniel was able to, you know, strike a deal with the music labels in America, and I think we're ridding ourselves of fear right now. And I think over the last, you know, since Napster and illegal file sharing and everything came in, I don't think the music industry knew how to react. So I think their natural re-jerk reaction was no, and they threw up this wall. And now I think, you know, there's some there's some forward-thinking executives that are now coming to the table. I think the regime's going to start changing over the next 5 years, and I think it's going to be about partnerships between companies like my company, Daniel's company, my partnership that I have with Bob and Clear Channel and those guys, and just creating this healthy dialogue that creates that creates financial models around it where, you know, where everybody can win and the artists can support themselves, and, you know, and it's not just about one company getting rich off of another company's demise. Yeah.
And Bob, final question to you. As you look out 5 years, where do you hope things are headed? What most excites you?
Well, I think I have no idea where it's going. But what I think is great is that we now have this access by using technology. We have new artists that no A&R guy's ever seen that can themselves reach people and expose their music. And we're going to find some great new artists coming out of that all of us who think we're great pickers of stars are going to say everybody missed. I think we're going to allow people who've got a little bit of success going to blow it out because they can reach the people that they want to connect with. I think it is great for the music industry. I think instead of trying to control the development of technology, which has never been successful in the history of the world, the record industry finally said, look, we don't know where it's going. Instead of being afraid that we're going to embrace it, and what we're going to do is pick the ones that are winning and use them to make money. They certainly need a lot more points of distribution than they have today. And the final thing is, for us, because we're primarily advertiser supported, I think we are allowing now our marketing partners, and I think about advertising not as spots, but as renting our consumer relationship to third parties, that we will allow them to reach people in a very real way, in a very connected way, but with the scale that they need to really build a big product. I mean, you know, when you do tiny things, it's wonderful, but it doesn't matter. But now we're able to do things at a scale where it really can matter, and it really does move the needle. And I agree with you guys. There is no winner or loser. We're not trying to prey on each other. We're all trying to say if we all work together, we're going to build something really big. And by the way, we got to make room for everybody in the tent, including those new artists that heretofore have sort of been their whole life sending tapes to record companies trying to get somebody to listen to them. They don't need them anymore. They can send it directly to the fans, and we can watch things grow. And maybe at a certain point, they need the business support, they need the professional management, they need the distribution or whatever to go the whole way. But I think that's much more exciting, because I think anytime you unleash creativity and you provide tools so it's not the people with capital control the creativity, but the people with the ideas control creativity, we wind up with some fantastic products.
I think that's an awesome note to end on. Bob, Daniel, Troy, thank you so much for participating in this. I think this was a great discussion.
Thanks.